Good evening, Mr. Bond fans, and is that a video game in my pocket, or am I just happy to see you? It's this channel, come on, it's obviously Nightfire on the Game Boy Advance. A key appealing element of James Bond video games has always been the concept of putting the player in the shoes of James Bond. Well, why limit that appeal to the home? Nightfire on the TV in the living room? Yeah, that's obviously great, but what happens when you have to do a little thing called sharing, and let other people have a turn and use the screen for far inferior things? Imagine being able to access Nightfire anywhere you want.
This is great!
Funnily enough, I have very specific memories of Nightfire on the GBA being released. It came out a few months after the home console version, and I remember racing over to the house of one of my best friends because he'd bought the game that day and we were so excited to start playing. Oh my god, it's Nightfire on the Game Boy Advance!
Oh my god, it's Nightfire on the Game Boy Advance.
Yeah, there's a reason I never actually owned this game as a kid, and that first interaction scarred me for life. By the time this version had come out, me and my friends were fully embedded in Nightfire obsession. It was our go-to multiplayer game. Personally, I'd spend hours upon hours exploring every single corner of the game, and from the single level experience I had that day of the GBA version, I had absolutely no desire to invest my time in it any further, and that says an awful lot. Nightfire on the Game Boy Advance tries to do the unthinkable and actually fit a 3D first-person shooter adventure into this thing, and from a technology perspective, the fact that they could even do that is applaudable. Whether or not they should have done it, though, is another matter. At the time, I was mainly using my GBA for 2D platformers and Pokemon games, so Nightfire was something quite remarkable compared to those, and while there were other attempts at first-person shooters on the GBA, maybe they fared much better, but right off the bat, knowing what level of control a 3D first-person shooter requires, I'm surprised that developers looked at the GBA with its mere D-pad, A, B, and shoulder buttons and thought it was a match made in heaven. It was barely a match made on Earth, really. But contemporary reviews of the game weren't terrible, so maybe I'd appreciate it more on a return attempt. Most cite it as a passable shooter on the platform, and I'm a content-starved Bond fan, so it's either this or, I don't know, I finished reading Denise Richards' autobiography. It's still better than any of those John Gardner books I read. So let's get into it, and hey, the game does get points right off the bat for opening with a gun barrel sequence. Shame that the limited animation make it look like Bond has a twisted ankle or something. I feel like all this is missing is audible flinches. Ow! 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 And why exactly does the blood come down in a straight line? Could the technology really not handle a curvy line? I mean, they managed to put curves on this lady. Was the blood really that difficult? Loading up a new game from the menu gives the players a choice of normal or hard difficulty. You can then enter the name you want on one of 3 separate save files, and then we're off into Mission 1 of 9, Austrian Castle. Much like the home console versions, we have pre-level cutscenes to give us story details and exposition. Of course, they couldn't fit fully animated cutscenes onto the GBA, so instead we have a few stills and text. The story at this point is the same as the home consoles. Bond is tasked with infiltrating the party of a Raphael Drake, who MI6 suspect is somehow involved in the theft of some missile guidance hardware, which will be exchanging hands at his castle retreat tonight. Dialogue is pretty much verbatim from the home consoles, and the images are clearly de-resed stills, except for one small detail. That ain't Pierce Brosnan. Why'd you lie to me, Boxar? Why'd you do the dirty on me like that? Okay, so the Bond that they're using here is clearly the same character model that they were using in the previous Bond game, Agent Under Fire. Apparently the developers only secured Pierce Brosnan's likeness a ways into Nightfire's development, so I suppose while those cutscenes in the home console version were updated, for the GBA version they just figured people were going to be seeing this on a postage stamp-sized panel on a 3-inch non-backlit screen, so nobody's going to notice, so meh. I mean, it's so pixelated if you squint a bit you can pretend you're playing as almost any of the Bonds. Oh hey, it's the George Lazenby Bond game I always wanted. By Mission 3, the character model clearly reverts to being the Brosnan one that they used for the main consoles, but honestly, I think I might have liked it more if they'd have just kept using the Agent Under Fire Bond. I really liked that we had an original video game Bond, and I was actually kinda psyched to see him get a little reprise of the role here in some form. Anyway, into the level we go. There are 3 environments to work your way through, and it's surprisingly faithful to the home console version. Locations are obviously smaller and pared down by necessity, but for the most part, again, it's kind of insane that they actually packed this into the limited hardware they had to work with. So long as you keep moving anyway. The environments, while technically impressive for the time, do look incredibly ugly. For the gameplay for this review, I was recording my emulator playthrough, so I appreciate that I was expanding the image to a screen size that the developers would probably wince at the thought of it being played on, but even on the Game Boy screen, it's quite muddy, and if you stay still even just for a moment, everything just sort of blurs together and you kind of lose perspective. Environments are 3D, but characters are 2D sprites, so character animation is obviously incredibly incredibly limited. It's impressive that they respond to, like, the flash of light from firearms, though, which is a nifty little detail. Getting into the castle leads to another cutscene of Drake's speech, and of Bond meeting with deep cover agent Dominique and CIA agent Zoe Nightshade, who, despite appearing in formal attire in the cutscene, is actually in her Agent Under Fire costume in her gameplay sprite, which is kinda odd. Makes me wonder if the cutscenes were just added super late in the day. Anyway, she's captured, and you need to blast around the last environment of the game to save her, grab the missile guidance module briefcase, and take out a helicopter piloted by Drake's henchman, Rook. Now, in the console version, the levels after this are an on-rails shooting and driving level, respectively. For the GBA, sadly, these don't feature, and we skip straight to the next shooting level in the story in Japan. Bond is sent to meet Drake's head of Asian operations, Mayhew, who fears for his life and agrees to give MI6 information on Drake's Nightfire scheme in exchange for protection, which he needs sharpish as his residence comes under attack very quickly. Again, I'm surprised how close to the home console version they could make this level. It's very impressive. Less impressive, however, is actually playing your way through the level. A lot of my gripes with this game are to do with the controls specifically, and there are so many different button combinations to remember to do relatively simple things. Scrolling through weapons and gadgets is annoying because the button configurations are incredibly close, and I often just end up hopping up or down when I just want to change weapons and vice versa. There are definitely knacks to it, the order that you press the buttons in and so on, but when you're in the middle of a firefight and it's all quite frantic, it can be very easy to slip up. I also hate how you have to scroll through everything on this damn wheel to get what you want. They're obviously having to fit a lot of control into a much smaller than desirable device, and it's far, far, far from perfect, but for all its clunkiness, it does work at least. Works a hell of a lot better than Bond going upstairs does. I mean, geez, to say the game allows you to jump, it's weird that running up a flight of stairs is such a clunky experience. Maybe Bond really does have that sprained ankle after all. Ow, 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 ow. The rest of the level is taking out a lot of goons around Mayhew's home, saving his servants and performing mission-necessary tasks like destroying Mayhew's computer. Weirdly, the sprites for Mayhew's servants are based off a promo image of the Dominique character, I think. Something about the pose and dress is so similar. The level ends with a boss battle with a sneaky ninja who appears and kills Mayhew. This is a fun little fight, and I love how the ninja sprite moves around all hunched over like a tiptoeing Grinch, and heck, they even went to the effort of animating the thing doing a roll, which is a nice bit of attention to detail. Level 3 switches gears a bit and presents a stealth challenge for the most part as Bond navigates around Drake's Phoenix Organization Tower to find more evidence of Nightfire. This is a real trial and error experience. This level of visibility is definitely not designed for an intricate stealth experience. Like, I know those grey things up there are cameras, but how the hell am I supposed to tell which way they're pointing? If you get seen by a guard, it's immediately mission over 2. In the home console version, they'd run to the nearest alarm and you had time to stop them, but here, nope, one ill-timed peek around a corner and it's back to the start with you. The level does allow you to use some cool gadgets though. There's a tranquilizer pen and a keychain stunner, and you know what, for the most part overall I think that the game utilizes Bondy gadgets incredibly well. The grapple is here and works in certain environments where these big triangle hook things are visible, and the good old laser watch is here too. They probably didn't need to fit so many of these things in here, but I love that they did. Anyway, you go around hacking into computers and paralyzing the security staff before making it to an upper floor and retrieving the Nightfire data before all action kicks off, and suddenly it's okay to kill people again before bumping into Dominique for a quick interlude in the stairwell on the way up to the roof, where you grab a parachute and head off the building and into the next level, which tries to do its own unique thing too, being a very sniper-focused level, but oh dear lord, who thought long-range weapons had any place in a game where characters are represented by about 4 individual pixels? This was a lot of trial and error for me again. It's one of those things where you just need to do everything in a very specific order and stay out of sight, so it's a lot of barely nudging around corners to essentially fire at single pixels. Otherwise, 3 shots from a sniper and you're dead. It's very much an enforced stealth experience. How Bond takes damage in this game is slightly annoying in the sense that you don't really feel it as such. Bond grunts and groans when he's hit, sure, but in the middle of a firefight it can occasionally just suddenly seem to deplete away very quickly without you noticing. Not that I think they need to go as extreme as GoldenEye did, where the screen would flash and you would get knocked back by every single bullet, but particularly as the health system here is just body armor. It's not like 2 separate gauges like in the home console versions where body armor went on top of your actual health level. It can all just disappear very quickly and suddenly. Blowing up a door with a mounted laser cannon allows you to escape the level into Mission 5 Power Station, which is really where things start to divert from the home console version quite dramatically. Now, in the home console version, from the end of this level, Bond is whisked back to Drake's headquarters. Here, though, we enter some kind of training facility, and Rook is here, acting out his cutscene from the home console level countdown, where he turns to reveal his scarred face from from a result of Bond taking down his helicopter earlier. Here though, it's really kind of impossible to know what he's talking about a makeover for when his face is smaller than your little fingernail. While I think the game does a really great job translating that story to this pared down version, I think it does kind of assume that you already have some familiarity with the Nightfire story from the home consoles. Due to the limited technology that they have to work with here, some of the story details do come out a little bit murky, and you probably needed more in the way of context than just the pixelated screen grabs that they have here. Presumably this is the place where Drake is training all of his astronauts, as Bond sticks on a spacesuit and then you control him floating through these underwater tunnels and zapping goons with a laser beam. I guess it's a substitute for the underwater driving level from the home console version. There are even these big fans here that you need to pass through, which were an endless source of frustration for me during my playthrough. And I know I'm getting really geeky about this, but the sprites of the goons in this level, they kind of look like super pixelated versions of Bond in his spacesuit from Nightfire promo material, don't you think? Anyway, I actually thought this level was a bunch of fun for the most part. It's just kind of fun gliding around in zero gravity, and you don't have to worry about changing weapons or reloading because you have this laser, which is really cool, and the thing even culminates with a boss battle with Rook. You're in this silo environment, and while you're out of the water by this point, there's still this giant fan at the bottom of the thing that you jump over, and then that lifts you up in the air to these different platforms. It's a cool setup. The controls just kind of kill it, though. The whole experience ends up feeling super clunky. From play that I've seen of the PC version of Nightfire, a version of this setup exists there in that game too, and I would imagine that it plays much better, but hopefully I'll get to reviewing that some other day. Killing Rook sends him falling into the fan below, and Bond is picked up by Kiko, who whisks him back for helipad caviar with Drake. The scene plays out just like in the main console game, with Dominique being exposed as a double agent and then kicked off the building to her death, and the level is Bond battling his way out of Drake's headquarters, starting off in the oh, hey, my gun's turned gold! Yeah, so the game doesn't offer much in the way of rewards as such, but there is a bronze, silver, gold ranking system in place when you finish a level, and if you get a gold score on a level, then the next level you start it with the golden P2K, which is pretty neat. I just wish there were more rewards like that in the game. As it is though, the ranking system is a bit flawed, the worst aspect of it being that you need to achieve at least a bronze rating to play the next level to even progress in the game, so even if you complete a level, it's not good enough. You need to get a bronze 007 to pass on to the next one. This annoyed me at first, but if you search around the levels a bit to pick up these 007 tokens, you should be covered as they account for a huge amount of points in the final scoring. Just while we're on this though, it does bother me that when you collect the tokens in this game, it sounds like this. Whereas in a game like Agent Under Fire, for instance, picking up these tokens treats you to this. It just feels so lackluster in the Game Boy Advance version, like a shrug, like, alright, I guess I'll pick up that thing and maybe put it in my pocket. Anyway, this is a very tough but fun level. It's all out shooting and you're going around a lot of the same office environments from earlier. There are some irritating civilians getting in the way and roaming around in loops like they're animatronics on the Haunted Mansion ride at Disneyland, but otherwise a really solid level which ends with Australian intelligence agent Laura McCall bursting in to provide Bond a getaway vehicle. I love that they retained the moment from the cutscene from the home console version, by the way, where Bond is clearly mourning the death of Dominique. It shows that even in this pared down version of the game, they were really committed to telling a genuine story here by having this emotional moment. I'm very glad it's here. Maybe it was just Stockholm Syndrome settling in at this point though, because I actually quite enjoyed the next level, Island Caves too. Also, I'm really off chicken lately. I wonder if there's a connection. Do you remember when you first came here? How you hated Nightfire on the Game Boy Advance? How you were sick when you even saw one? I have taught you to love it. Its clunky controls, its blocky textures, and even the limited voice acting. It's a very simple setup here. Explore Drake's island base and shut down his jamming satellites. This takes the place of the island infiltration level from the home console version, which was a combination of driving and on-rails shooting, but here it's just you and Allura shooting guns on the beach, or in my case, more Allura than need. I mean, this is a tough level and it's easy to be ambushed on, and sometimes it is just easier to let Allura go in and kill everyone for you. You do eventually have to split up though, as Bond heads up the cliff and you use satchel charges to blow up these satellites. You eventually pick up a Militech grenade launcher as well, which is awesome. It's a little annoying that in some places goons are immediately spawned right behind you, and unless you know that this is going to happen, there's no way of easily recovering from it, but this was still a really fun time regardless. Next up is the penultimate level of the game, which gets very much back on tracks of faithfully adapting the home console version again, as Bond and Allura split up and you infiltrate Drake's underground base. I don't know why Drake's henchmen all have these red jackets on, but I appreciate that it makes them an easier target, and even helps me to believe that Drake just hired a load of clones of this guy from Tomorrow Never Dies. I'm still having some fun at this point, don't get me wrong, but the format does get a little bit tiresome. It's all walking through corridors, and then you'll pass a certain point, and this will trigger a bunch of guards to spawn, and you have to take care of them before pressing on, but it is a nice environment, and at least the red coats pop out against the background, so it is easy to shoot the goons. The level eventually culminates in a section of the game I'm really impressed that they even tried to replicate at all. Bond ends up underneath the exhausts of the space shuttles, and you need to hide in a room before they set off, or you're going to be incinerated, and once they're gone, goons and ninjas appear, and you have to fight them. I just think it's really impressive that they could fit this environment into the game when it's such a short part of the level, and it features such elaborate props. Things end with a cutscene where we see Bond sending Kiko to her fiery end before taking off into outer space for the final level of the game, which is another super faithful recreation. I was quite surprised at just how much of a replica this was. You have to sabotage Drake's missiles before they fire to Earth and destroy NATO bases. Some goons are sent in to fight you at scheduled interviews, while Drake looks on from his viewing platform. Much like the underwater power station level earlier on, I actually had an awful lot of fun with this. Sure, the controls are clunky and it's annoying to have to pivot yourself in every direction, but the zero gravity is fun, and the fact you just have this laser and you don't have to worry about swapping weapons or collecting ammo, it streamlines things a lot more to a point that I'm actually just having a really good time with it. After the missiles are suitably sabotaged, Drake appears for a final boss showdown where the two of you just kind of float around in space for a bit, shooting lasers at each other, but terminating him completes the game. His space station explodes and Bond heads back to Earth for a final rendezvous with Allura. It's the same setup as in the home console version cutscene 2, with the pair in the Aston Martin, and it retreats into the sea because, well, I mean, the car is also a submarine. In this version of the game, however, there's no context for that at all because there are no driving levels, and the Aston Martin doesn't feature in its submarine form in a previous cutscene. So I just love the idea that people who were playing this game without an experience of the home console version would think that this ends on some kind of gag where Bond accidentally reverses his car into the sea. We'll let the autopilot be our designated driver. Is this making you wet? And that's the end of the game. In terms of replayability, well, you could always do the thing on hard, I guess, or try to get gold medals on everything. There's no multiplayer here, which is understandable given that this is the Game Boy Advance, and you'd probably need to have multiple game cartridges and a link cable, and good luck finding an entire friendship group who each owned a copy of this. There are some button code cheats which wouldn't work on the emulator, but did work on the cartridge, and these include infinite health, increased ammo, unlock all the levels, and, bizarrely, high-pitched voices. I don't know. So there we go, Nightfire on the Game Boy Advance, and if this was your only exposure to the brilliance of Nightfire, I'm so sorry. Compared to the home console version, it's a far inferior product, and primarily because it's really just trying to be a pared-down version of that game on technology that just can't support it. The pseudo 3D world it creates is impressive and monstrous at the same time, to the point that I feel like I'm playing some kind of tech demo, like this game only exists so that others could come after and be more successful once the kinks had been all worked out. There just aren't enough buttons on the hardware itself to make this a successful port, and I don't think that anyone would be so desperate to play Nightfire on the go that this would be a worthy substitute. That being said, I did still have some fun playing this to completion finally after all these years, and being a Nightfire geek that I am, it was cool seeing how some of the levels transitioned to this format and where it diverted. I'm not going to suggest that everyone rush to eBay or start digging in landfill to uncover copies of this to play themselves, but for what it's worth, I passed a couple of hours for this Bond fan. At some point in the near future, I'll get to covering Everything or Nothing on the GBA, a Bond game which I think does a far better job of translating a home console Bond game to a portable platform. But that is for another day. If you haven't already subscribed to this channel, you can do so by clicking the subscribe button below. You can also click the Mrs. Bell button if you want to stay really up to date on future uploads I make on this channel. Also below are links to my various social media pages, my Patreon page, Twitter page, Facebook page, so do follow me on those platforms if you care to do so. And with all that being said, so long for now, Bond fans.